Hi everybody. I'm going to be without a mic. If you have any trouble hearing me, raise your hand and I'll say it louder once more. Welcome to the City Commissioners Forum. We are very lucky to have 5 of 13 candidates for the Democratic positions, or 2 positions, here with us today. And we're not going to do any of the preliminaries because we have a limited amount of time and relatively large number of people. So instead, and all of the candidates were previously informed of that, they know they don't have time to give their stumps. All of the committee people were previously informed to read the questionnaire so they know who they're looking at. So we are all on the same page and ready to get going. Just a couple pieces of business to be 100% clear, especially for the live stream. The City Commissioner's Office is the office in Philadelphia that oversees voting. We'll be electing, in theory, 2 Democrats and 1 Republican to the role. And of course, the primary is on May 21st for anybody watching at home. So today we're going to try to dig a little bit deeper than what we did on your questionnaires. You guys all did a really great job, a very thoughtful preparation of your questionnaires, and we really appreciate that. And we want to take it a little bit beyond that. So in honor of fairness, I used a random number generator to decide who was going first for each question, and I will adhere to that. All right? I'm Amanda Pfeiffer, by the way, committee person in 211. All right, so we're going to start with you, Dennis Lee. And
like being first.
By the way, all of these questions are going to be answered by all of you. Just the order of which is being answered is I will call out. All right. So first, Dennis Lee, how do you differentiate yourself from others on the ballot? What makes you the better or more qualified candidate?
Well, first of all, let me just say thank you to the Second Ward for putting this together. I think that it will give us all a chance to see and view everything. My background is that I was the former Chief Deputy City Commissioner, so I have a skill set that distinguishes me from others other than the current person running Visa. Also, I come with a background that I've been doing voter education, voter registration for possibly over 20 years now. That may not give me a leg up because someone that are running probably have been doing it a little bit longer. So I think what makes me distinguish between all those, except for one other person that you would pick with me, is that I would be able to bring new ideas based on what I've already seen. Thank you.
Thank you. And I did neglect to say each question will be timed.
Right.
That was my fault, not yours. Sorry.
And how long?
So I'll tell you the time at the beginning of the question.
Okay.
This 1 minute, okay?
I saw the sign.
Yeah. Sorry, Carrie's handling the timing.
I will hold this up 10 seconds before you need to finish. So
Give you a little wrap up. Okay. So this question again is 1 minute. Jen DeVore.
Great. Hi everyone. Thank you so much for having me today. Jen DeVore, candidate for City Commissioner. I think what makes me stand out from the other candidates is that I've been putting in the work for so long. I'm a committee person, I'm a block captain, I work my polls on election day, and I really see the opportunities from doing all the jobs that the City Commissioner interacts with, and as well as my professional background in communications as well. I spent the last 7 years of my career working at an organization, Campus Philly, mobilizing college students and roots in Philadelphia, and so I see the opportunity in addition to engaging everybody, but specifically with high school and college students.
Thank you. Khalil Williams.
Hi everyone, Khalil Williams, out of the 8th Ward committee person, the 24th Division. So what separates me from the other candidates is really 2 things. Once, I'm the only attorney in the race, and I'm doing election protection both before law school and as an attorney. And so I have both trained and overseen election protection operations on election day, which is all the troubleshooting that occurs at the polls. This is reporting to the Board of Elections to make sure that if there are problems. This is making sure that you have people that understand what happens if machines go down and how to assist people in fixing them. All those things that are really like the election day chaos, I've done and I've overseen it. And I think that's incredibly important in an environment in which we are having new voting machines. They're going to be rolled out sometime later this year, we think. And then also in the presidential election in 2020, it's going to be highly contested. The other piece of experience I have that I don't think anyone else has is the advocacy, having worked with Brennan Center for Justice, and really press the issue forward on a number of election reform issues.
Thank you. And Maura.
Hi, my name is Maura Bohannon. I'm also the City Commissioner candidate, and thank you for having me. I think both my professional and personal background stands out in a way that is different from other candidates. I am in communications and project management in my day job, which I think will lend to managing the incredible number of polling places. Personally, I have found my polling place had many problems, including the wrong ballot, including my vote not counting in 2016, and I think my management experience will help manage the entire city on election day, but the communications side of it throughout the year, not just the few weeks coming up to election day. We need to engage voters, engage committee people and boards every day of the year, working throughout the city in the high turnout wards and the low turnout wards. Thank you.
Thank you. And Luigi Borda.
Hi, I'm Luigi Borda. I think what makes me unique is I've been a school teacher in Philadelphia for the last 30 years. I came to this country as an immigrant, and when I was 18 years old at Central High School, I renounced my Italian citizenship in order to vote in Philly for the first time. And 7 years ago, as part of a caucus within our union, I ran 100 miles to Harrisburg where I found out they cut our budget. And I found out one thing, that Harrisburg is not going to care about us unless we vote. 4 years ago, I ran for committee person, and 2 years in this last cycle, we were able to recruit 172 educators. And your ward has 10 educators. We found out that most wards have educators who are already committee people. And it's our goal to use that teacher team to teach the city this convoluted ward system that I've been learning for the last 7 years, and we look forward to teaching them that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. If at any point you need me to repeat a question, if you're last in line, for instance, let me know. No shame in that. This question is going to have 2 minutes for response, and we're going to start with Luigi Borda. If elected, please describe what your first 90 days in office will look like. Highlight at least one priority that will be in effect by the end of that time, and name specific steps that you will have taken to implement it.
Okay, thank you. One thing or two things? Oh, highlight one.
At least one thing, but 90-day look.
Well, our team is already getting started. And we plan to activate retired teachers in a lot of roles already. One of our things is called Philly Civics 101. It's 10 simple lessons to teach, I at least have a visual because I'm a teacher, starting with the ward system, starting with committee people. We spent 2 days going to council. 8 of the 10 sitting council people have agreed to partner with a social studies teacher in their district to teach the 10 lessons. Then we want to do it as 17-year-olds, so they know the process before they're 18, and hopefully can run in and hit the ground running and go for there. The second thing is, with regards to that program, all of our seniors get a voter registration card on their birthday, okay? And then when they graduate, they get a absentee ballot, just in case they leave the city. And I'll tell you why. As I talk to the 18-year-olds, a lot of them, they leave Philadelphia without ever having voted. They start their life in college, they get excited, and their lives begin. They come back, they're 22 years old, they never voted. Then they're embarrassed. You ask a kid who's 23 years old if they voted, they all say yes. They're like, sure, Mr. Board, I voted. I'm like, okay, well, the statistics say if I ask 10 of you and you all say yes, that can't be true, okay? So, all of a sudden, they've never voted, and I don't know if we have any Catholics out there, but see the confessional? If you don't go in there for a while, you just tell everybody, yeah, I went, but you may go, right? So we need to make it a habit. We need to make it a habit so that they don't look at that and say, oh my goodness, I don't know what's in there. So those two are already started. We just need the team in the office to start getting them mobilized. Thank you.
Thank you. Dennis Lee, you have 2 minutes.
Great. First, 3 things. One is voter education. We will be partnering with the school system as well as all different schools to make sure that civics is in there. We'll be doing mock elections, which we need to do more of. The second thing, voter registration. We will update the voter registration piece so that we can make sure that people are not missing their deadlines. And I think overall, something that we can do to increase voter turnout. People do better when they know better. Something that's not working right now is we would implement a system whereby if you miss going to the polls, we would send you out a notice, the same way we send out a notice when your polling place is changed. We'll send out a notice, we missed you at the polls, right? And then we would tell folks when the next election day is. It's very important that people understand how they voted and cut down the barriers for voting. So that's what we would do in the first 90 days. We would implement something.
Thank you. Laura Bohannon?
In the first 90 days, I would focus on communication and voter outreach and education. Communication, I would start with the website. I don't know if anyone's tried to find information on the current city commissioner website. It's impossible to do in under 4 or 5 clicks, and you get sent to other web pages, and it's very convoluted. And so the first few weeks even, I would do a complete audit of the website, an audit of the languages that the website's being translated into to make sure that we're reaching as many people who have the technology to get to the website as possible. Second, I would improve voter education both for the pre-voter so that they're ready at 18 to go into the polls, and also for the non-voter as they exist today. Philadelphia has one of the highest rates of adult illiteracy, so I would want to work with the Mayor's Office of Adult Education to include a civic education component and make sure those folks are registered to vote and know when to vote and how to vote. I would also include training both for the voters. My first 90 days will be in 2020 coming up to the presidential primary, and we can't make any mistakes for voters or for people working the polls. So with the new machines coming in, we need to make sure that everyone is ready to go for that.
Khalil Williams, and I've been asked to make sure that you guys are all using the mics.
Thanks. So let me just I'll give 4 really quick. The first would be randomized ballot position. My reading of the election code suggests that there actually is space for us to have more than one ballot in the city that can be implemented. And so, for instance, we have 41 people running at large for city council. And the way that our system currently exists, they pick out of a can. It's very advantageous to the person that picks first, very disadvantageous to the person that picks 41st. And so my plan would be to try to implement that on day 1. One of 2 things are going to happen. Either it will be implemented with no problem, or I'll get sued, and I'm happy to take that fight to court. Second, I want to have a meeting in certainly the first 90 days, but mostly in the first month of being elected, which is just connecting stakeholders. So that's connecting people in that's election protection staff, for the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights. That's committee people. That's anybody that plays any role in voting. The Commissioner's Office needs to be on the same page with all of them because, as Maura said, I think 2020 is going to be incredibly important. And so you just want to make sure that everyone knows exactly what their roles are and what the expectations from the Commissioner's Office should be. The third thing that I will do, and this will happen immediately, is have meetings that are in places other than Delaware and Spring Garden in City Hall. It's incredibly important that we're getting out into communities, and part of what we think about, we're talking about talking to voters or going to where they are, is making sure that we start by having meetings in those places with low voter turnout, places with low voter participation. And so having meetings in a building like this, I mean, if anyone's been to a city commissioners meeting knows there's not that many people there, so there's lots of opportunity to have them in other neighborhoods in the city. So that's something I would implement immediately. And the fourth thing, related to Maura's point on the website, there's an organization out there called Center for Civic Design. And one of the things that they do is they focus on overhauling election websites and helping election officials. And one of the things they'll tell you is that people don't process how to vote the way that we think, which is registration and then an election and then turnout. It's actually the opposite. And so making sure that our website is designed in a way that gets information to people effectively is really, really important.
Thanks. And last but not least, Jen DeVore.
Great, thank you. The 3 things that I would do within my first 90 days would be to recruit for election poll workers, stress test our current systems to make sure that election day is up and running. We're going to be training people on new machines. We have to get that in shape. And to make sure that we're holding regularly scheduled advance notice public meetings and put that into place and on the website. When it comes to stress testing the systems, who here has done a poll worker training before? Some, right? It needs improvement, especially since we're going to be having tons of new opportunities to learn about the new systems that will be in place. So we need to make sure that people are learning these machines, not just the poll workers, but the people that will be voting on them too, right? This needs to be open to the public. We need to recruit poll workers to work on election day. There's a 49% vacancy rate of poll workers across the city of permanent people elected to the election board. So we need to create an outreach campaign to make sure that people know these opportunities are available. We could be recruiting high school students that are 18 years and older, and I have a lot of ideas of how to build a pipeline to that. And then the third, as I mentioned, is holding these regularly scheduled advance notice meetings. Get them on the calendar. If it's the first Wednesday of every month, people know that they can expect that. This last round of meetings for the current voting machines, people had, 48 hours notice. It wasn't advertised well, so we need to make sure that we're being transparent, because without visibility and transparency, you can't have accountability.
Thank you. Okay, we'll bring Omar Sabir in this round. Hello. Just to let you know how things are running, I'm going to ask a question. Everyone's going to answer it. You'll have a set amount of time to answer each question. I'll tell you in advance, and Carrie will give you the signal if you're getting close to going over. But actually, we're going to start this one with Jen DeVore. Jen, in your opinion, what's currently the biggest obstacle to well-run elections in Philly, and what would you do to overcome it? The single biggest.
So I think the single biggest obstacle in current elections is something I just talked about, is the poll worker training and recruitment process. Because if we can't have a well-run election day and we don't have a positive customer experience, then the people that already are voting are not likely to come back, and it'll be very hard to engage the people that will be working with year-round to reconnect them to the process. So again, I think it starts with an outreach campaign to promote that these opportunities exist. After the 2016 presidential election, there was such an incredible wave of people that wanted to be civically engaged, and so many people took the route of running for committee person, which was awesome. But I thought there was a missed opportunity to recruit for our poll workers, and so I want to make sure that we're constantly doing that. We're working with high school students who are 18 years or older. Public schools are already closed on election day, and they need community service hours, so this will help. The trainings will be hands-on. You will be able to touch the machines, press the buttons. You'll have a quiz at the end that's self-graded, but at least you'll be able to know when you're where you stand with the knowledge run.
And stop you there, Jen. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
I should have told you 1 minute.
Oh, sorry.
And Maura, you're up next. Same question. 1 minute.
Thank you. Can you repeat the question?
Absolutely can. What do you think is the single biggest obstacle to well-run elections in Philly, and what would you do to overcome it?
I agree that the amount of poll workers that we have in the city is not sufficient to run successful, error-free elections. And so recruiting is a huge part of it, but I also want to recruit enough that we can have shifts. I could never work a election day, a 14-hour shift with school closed, and the tiny stipend that wouldn't cover childcare is prohibitive for me and many people across the city. So if we have shorter shifts with maybe 1 or 2 people covering the entire day, so there's no, to have a full day coverage would make the day run smoother, allow more people to be able to work the elections, and hopefully have less errors on the day that it happens.
Omar Sabir, you're up next. 1 minute.
Hello, how's everybody doing? Good. Well, apologize for being late. I'm on my 3rd event, and my Uber, it was difficult then. I apologize. Well, the first thing you have to do is you have to get people to the polls. I mean, we see it disproportionate in different parts of the city where people are just not voting. So to make the elections better, we have to get people to the polls. I want to do community outreach, talking to people, getting people knocking on their doors and getting them to the polls. I'm from West Philadelphia. People don't vote. If you ask 9 out of 10 people when it's election day, they don't know even when election day is. So I think we have to train the committee people, partner up with different elected officials and the constituent services, because when people are calling 311 trying to get information about elections, or they can't get into the city commissioner's office, they call the elected official's office. So I will partner up with them, community outreach, talking to people, robust, getting the word out there, just about election day.
Thank you. Khalil.
Thanks. So I think there are 2 things I'd focus on. So first is information, which I think is sort of undergirding everybody's questions, but things like social media and making sure that people know exactly where to reach out to are incredibly effective. The commissioners do an okay job of that, but it needs to be much more robust and much more forward planning, and that means we have to lobby city council to get more money in order to have a more robust public education campaign about where to go when we have problems. Then we need to be doing more of that. And I think that people that are effective, that really want to work hard in this role, can get those sort of things done. The other thing I've mentioned, I think as Moore pointed out, is we don't pay poll workers enough. There was just a $20 increase, but that took 20 years to happen. We're still nowhere near the minimum, nowhere near living wage for that. And so it would cost about $1.7 million to bring poll workers up to a minimum wage. I'm sorry, to a living wage. Mayor Kenny just proposed a budget that was $5 billion, so that would be 3/10,000ths of the budget would bring us up to living wage, so sort of drops in the bucket when you think about it. But things like that, I think, really can advance the ball and get better poll workers in place.
And Luigi Borda?
I think hands down it would be voter apathy, and we mentioned education, and I feel great that everybody's mentioning that we have to educate people on why we need to vote. In 2016, 2 million Pennsylvanians voted in the presidential election. The margin of victory was 44,000 votes. 364,000 registered Philadelphians did not vote. So 2 years later, in the primary in 2018, only 17% of registered voters came out. So in the 2 years after the presidential election, we still only had 17% come out for a primary. So we need to make it clear why it's important to vote in every election, and that's why earlier when I talked about the civics, Philly Civics 101, we need to make it a habit starting at 17, where everybody votes twice a year. And we did that in our ward. Personally, as a committee person, I went from 35% in 2018. In this last, we made it close to 70%. So our team has a sorry about that.
Thanks. I greatly appreciate you all being so circumspect at the time. And last but not least, Dennis Lee.
Yes, I believe the question was about what is the number one reason for why there's trouble on election day. One is, the number one reason is alluded to the poll workers training. That's one. And then we need more teams to troubleshoot on election day. We just don't have enough people, boots on the ground. It just reminded me, we start at, normally the city commissioner's office starts about 6 o'clock in the morning. Our first call comes from the polling places for people asking one question: how do you turn on the machine? Because people are nervous, right? So you need more teams, you need more boots on the ground, right, to calm folk down, especially in a presidential election. People get very nervous and what have you, so you need more boots on the ground. You definitely need more training, but you definitely need more boots on the ground between the hours of 6 to 8. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, this question will be for Luigi Borda first, and you'll have 1 minute to respond. Kind of a long one, so bear with me. Okay, in the last election, here in the second ward, there was a very well-publicized case of an elected elections official who repeatedly threatened to punch a voter who questioned why the Bible was on the check-in table inside the polling place. Situations such as these are not specific to the second ward, and from other anecdotal and press reports, they do not appear to be entirely uncommon across the city. Please describe what action you would take to prevent and resolve any further situations such as this.
Well, and obviously, I mean, we definitely would need to do something with regards to educating poll workers on any potential problems that they might have on election day, and having systems in place when there is some sort of interaction like that. Ideally, you'd have everyone informed on what should be happening and making sure that that does occur. I wasn't aware of that, and
Anything about what you would do following an incident like that?
oh well, obviously we'd have to find out why. What was the why it happened, and just I'm confused. What to happen after the
Yeah, the question being like, as commissioner, how would you respond to a situation like that?
Okay. Well, we definitely need a system in place where there's some repercussions. So we have to with maybe a panel with regards to what kind of remedies for that.
Thank you. Cleo. 1 minute.
Sure, so this is actually a problem that I've addressed a number of times as a person that has overseen election protection. So I think the first thing you have to do, if these things are as common as people think, and I think that they are relatively frequently, this is why you need a larger pool of people that are eligible to serve as poll workers, and so making sure that you're pulling from the broadest possible resource. I talked to my questionnaire about bringing law students and younger lawyers in the process, the people that really enjoy enforcing rules, and as a lawyer, I sort of know that, even if we're a little sticklers about it, those people can be really helpful in bringing calmness to a polling place and making sure that the process is running smoothly. So drawing from a bigger pool, I think gives you more opportunities. The second thing I'd say, and I think the thing that's most important, is you have to respond really swiftly. I mean, everyone knows about this really weird case of like a new Black Panther guy standing outside a poll working place, and as a result of that, Republicans for a decade have been talking about the voter intimidation that happens in the city. And so these things can spiral out of control and like make people lose faith and confidence in the process. And so you really have to go make sure you're very hard and make sure that you resolve those issues quickly.
Thank you. Jen DeVore.
Great. So there are 3 things that I think need to be tackled. One, again, it always goes back to, I think, the better trainings for election board workers, making sure that there is that customer service. There's FAQs on how to handle these situations, and there's more communication and role-playing practice at the trainings. I think we also need to train voters and teach voters how to properly report this stuff. I've had incidences at the polls where people have done illegal things and you get caught up in the moment, you don't know what to record, and so making sure that maybe there's an online form and that there's sheets to fill out an incident report. And then I also think that we need to have consequences. And in an instance like this, assuming that the poll worker had the right training and the voter knew how to report the incident properly, then there could be consequences, whether it be a fine or something beyond that.
Thank you. Dennis Lee.
Well, first and foremost, the city commissioner's office is not an enforcement entity. So right at the polling places, it is supposed to be a number to call the DA's office, right? The DA's office gets involved, and then afterwards, the city commissioner's office can have a hearing, and at that hearing can make recommendations. One city commissioner cannot make a decision. It takes 2 in order to vote on all policy. So what I would do in that instance, first and foremost, would make sure that the DA's office is heavily involved in that, because that's an enforcement issue. Secondly, I would have a public hearing meeting along with my colleagues so that we could go through the steps and which steps were taken and which steps were not. And we would then make a ruling on that.
Thank you. And Omar, 1 minute.
Yeah, so one of the things I wanted to do when I get in office is have a mobile application. And you know how as a committee person, you get those phones and you have to pick them up. If you have the mobile application, the moment that you see trouble, just kind of almost like your Uber, you have the geothermal that's relevant to your location. You can put down those type of problems. And then also, we would partner up with the district attorney's office, committee assembly, a number of different community groups that care about nonpartisan and election rights. And we'll have them posted inside of each ward. So if there is an issue, they'll be having fast response to get over there. They're called like rovers. So every successful candidate, you typically have about 2 or 3 rovers inside of each ward across the city. So if there's any issues at divisions, you can call them up, or you'll have a quick pulse. For the city commissioner's office, if we have a nice mobile application and partner up with the district attorneys, attorney general's office, and other civic groups that care about election protection, I don't think that will occur.
And more.
The problem with going last is all of the good ideas have already been spoken. But yes, I absolutely agree. More training for poll workers so they know what they're supposed to be doing and what they're not supposed to be doing. And zero tolerance of violence at any poll location. I mean, as city commissioner, I'd be walking past Octavia Cepeda's statue, who was, a victim of extreme violence on election day. So, of course, I hope we never get there again. But there's zero tolerance of violence or threats of violence by anyone in a polling location. and that's a no-brainer. But of course, I stand by everything everyone said before. It's an unfortunate situation, and we can't let it happen.
Thanks. Okay, so nobody falls asleep. We're gonna do a snappy one real quick. This is a one-word answer. I will not tolerate any more than one word.
One word.
Okay. And we're gonna start with Maura and go down the line. So boom, boom, boom. Ready? All right. Which is the bigger problem, registration or turnout?
Turnout.
You can't say both. Okay.
Turnout.
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 I wanted to say more than one answer.
Turnout.
Turnout.
All right. Boo. My excitement took the word. Okay.
That wasn't fair. We agree on something, right?
Okay. We're going to start with Khalil on this one. 2 minutes to respond. Can you point to other cities or states that have better elections than Philly and PA? You can interpret what that means. Tell us what, if anything, you plan to adopt from those examples.
That's a big one. So, unfortunately, a lot of this stuff happens at the state level, but I'm happy to talk about the types of things that I think work well in other places. And we can start with the way the city commissioners are organized, which is that they are elected. And I think that there is a debate to be had on whether or not that should be the case. So Chicago, for instance, actually has a 3-person commission that is appointed essentially by what would be our court of common pleas. Those people serve staggered terms, so there's continuity across it, and those people are paid about half of what our commissioners paid, and they work part-time. They have other jobs, they are attorneys and do other stuff, but they are people with very, very strong backgrounds in elections, and I think that is the model that I wish that we had. We don't have that model. We do have, I think with the people on this panel, I think we do have a chance to elect really great people and people that care deeply about this. So just the organization, I think if we could start from scratch, you might do it differently. The second thing that a lot of cities have adopted that we have not, or that we may not be in a position to do, is hand mark paper ballots. Because we just pick voting machines that are ballot marking devices that are more vulnerable to hacking, that are more expensive and hard to maintain. We also don't have that option, and so we have to do sort of the best with what we have. New York City does have something that I think is really terrific. They had an NYC Votes mobile app that allows you to create your own sample ballot, which I think is incredibly important. As you know, the city commissioners and other sort of row office races are determined in large part by sample ballots being handed out to people at the polls. But the mobile app allows you to create your own sample ballot and basically bring that in place with you and make your own decisions about who to vote for. And it actually is, it has parameters that allows you to do that for the district you're in, so you can do it ahead of time, so it's not just some broad-based function. So lots of cities do better than us with information. Their websites are better than ours. I think it's a great place to start. Again, when we think about how people process information, and when people do Google searches, what comes up, search engine optimization is really important. I think we can start there as a way something the city commissioners can do specifically to move the ball.
Thank you. Luigi Gorda.
Well,
Microphone, please.
oh, sorry. We're currently looking at any city that has higher turnout than we do. We'd be surprised that many of them do. Okay, and any strategies that they're using to get voters to turn out, we would incorporate them. And as Khalil said, the hand marked paper ballots would be great. Unfortunately, they already made a decision with regards to those machines. Unless something drastic happens and they turn that over, we don't have the luxury of doing that. What we would also do is find all the counties and other cities that use the current machines that we're getting now and find out what worked with those machines and what didn't work, and then hopefully be ahead of the game with regards to any challenges that we face with the new machines.
Dennis Lee?
Well, I think there's a lot of good stuff that happens in Philly, but definitely because this state is so behind in all the things that we need to do online. We have to do same-day voter registration. We need to be able to mail in a ballot. We need to do all of those things. We need to eliminate all the barriers that keeps people from having a great voting experience. So there's a lot of cities that do that, a lot of cities that have all of these different pieces that we can implement, but it has to be done on the state level. So I would look at Wisconsin for just a thought. You know, the mail-in ballot. The percentage of people voting is always high. Voting on more than just one day. You know, and I don't think that the system that was voted on, I don't think it's too far-fetched that can't be turned back so that we can have what we need, and that is voting on a paper ballot.
Thank you. Maura?
Thank you. So a lot of things that I would like to change are on a state level. Early voting, no excuse absentee voting, and I have experience as a lobbyist that I'd be able to work with other commissioners around the state to lobby Harrisburg for these better systems for all Pennsylvania voters. One thing that I think the commissioners can do, coming from a different state, is California, for example, and I think some other states do this as well, is they send out a voter guide. It's a nonpartisan guide of all the people on the ballot, all the offices, and all of the ballot questions. And I think if we had something like that, even if it just started on the website before it was able to be mailed, before we found the budget to print and mail all the copies, would allow voters to go in the booth informed. We wouldn't have situations like the recent ballot question that raised the judge's retirement age, but was written in a way that made it seem like this was a new thing. So if there was sort of nonpartisan guides available to all voters, like they do in many other states, I think we would have a better informed electorate.
Thank you. Jen?
So I think that there are several cities that do elections in a more progressive way. I think the first would be to look at Portland, Oregon, that does voting by mail, no absentee, which I guess another way to do that is no excuse absentee ballot, just so people can sit around their kitchen table and discuss who they're voting for and why, and make an informed decision. I also think looking at select counties in California that do top-ranked voting in their primaries. So you have a list of primary candidates, and it's the top 2 vote getters, similar to how the commissioner's office is elected here, goes into the general election. So it really is a reflective of the voters, of who the candidates are. I would say Montgomery County and any county that has selected hand-marked paper ballots are certainly a more secure way to vote. And then Seattle, Washington has been trying some interesting things with campaign finance reform, which is a little bit out of the commissioner's office, but if we did that, I think we could play a role in it where candidates get vouchers from public vouchers for funding, because it's very expensive to run for office, as I'm sure everyone at this table knows. And you know, these are things that are state election code reform, and though this office can't legislate, we can advocate, and I certainly think that that's something that the commissioners should be doing year-round, is providing data, research, using the power of subpoena to bring testimonies from the people to the state to push for this progressive reform.
Thank you. And Omar?
Keeps cutting off. Denver, Colorado, they do the voting by mail. But the one thing I like about it, it has a trace ballot system, so you can track your vote from the moment that you get put it inside the mail. You can look it up on a computer, and you can see the time that it gets to the city commissioner's office, and then you can see when your actual vote is counted. And one of the things we did was it took pressure off of the county commissioner's office, because people wasn't calling all the time and asking about, you know, when is my vote, is it here, and all that kind of stuff, so you actually can see it. So it was definitely good. One of the things we're going to look at too is there's legislation that was pushed up in the state. It's called paid time off the loop. A lot of times we don't consider that. But there's a lot of people who's not making minimum wage who can't take time off, and this gives reasonable accommodations from the employer to allow people to vote. So as we look at these other areas where people are making minimum wage and you see low voter turnout, one of those things, and it's enacted in 23 states. So So it's definitely one of the things like allowed me in the State Center to have. We want to have automatic voter registration, of course, and we also want to have same-day voter registration to allow people to get registered and vote on that same exact day.
Thank you all for describing my dream world. Okay, a few things have changed since you guys got our questionnaire. The elephant in the room that we cannot not discuss is that voting machines have indeed been purchased and are set to be used in the 2019 general election. Please share your thoughts on how this process has been handled and whether or not you're in support of the organizations currently fighting to have this purchase overturned and the RFP reissued. I'll start with Laura.
I am absolutely in support of the organizations that are working to overturn this. I think the machine that they selected was the lowest rated by the ADA, and we need to make sure that all voters can vote as easily as possible. But more than the machine, the process was broken. There was very little public comment. It was not communicated to wards and committee people in a timely fashion, let alone the voting public. And when the controller of the city and the state auditor general are screaming, this doesn't look good, let's pause, and it gets pushed through, we have a problem. Was it also what I would do it differently, or just?
No,
okay.
I feel like covered.
Thank you.
Sorry, I just want to say you guys have 1 minute.
And thanks,
Oh.
This is the one, yeah, this is the 1 minute.
Just so you know, a couple of times.
Dennis Lee, you'll be next.
Okay.
So, just to restate, this is whether or not you agree with how the process, or what you think about how the process was organized, and whether or not you agree with the groups who are trying to have the decision overturned.
Well, I agree with the groups 110%. The process was no process because there was no visit. They had 2 years prior to where we could have had town hall meetings, hearings throughout the city, to find out exactly what the public wanted. We could have done that. We didn't do that. Even the public hearing itself, the 2 public hearings that we did have, one in the evening and one in the morning, right? And then the public comments couldn't even be used with the vendors. So I am truly not happy with the process. I'm truly not happy with the vote. And somehow or another, we can still flip this back. We just have to work hard, and we may have to take it to another level.
Thank you. Jen DeBoer.
I'm in agreement with the groups that are protesting this, and I've been fighting with them, from very early on in the process. I've written an op-ed about this in Generosity. I've testified to the commissioners at open hearings. I spoke at a protest at City Hall a few days before the vote was to be made, because this really was not a transparent process, and it does go back to transparency and visibility equating to accountability. I think that it's important too, not just to hold the commissioners accountable, but also City Council, who will ultimately approve this budget. This is an opportunity to rise to the occasion of reforming the way we vote in Philadelphia, and it should not have been seen as a burden, but as an incredible opportunity for us to lead the way and become a national model. And I hope that, there's discussion right now of the decision to be overturned. That could happen. But if not, I look forward to working with the city to make sure that we implement these machines in the best way we can.
Thank you. Luigi.
Coming last on this one's tough. I echo everything the candidate said. I went to the evening meeting. I was so happy that the second meeting during the day was a snow day, actually. So we were off of school, and I was just so surprised that every person was saying some really great reasons why we shouldn't do this, and then the controller did the same, and then they voted on it. So I'm hoping it gets overturned, and with all our help and help with everyone in the city, we can start the process over, because I like to tell our students all the time that we're here until June, we said, in school, but we're going to have these machines for a long time, and we can't rush it.
Omar?
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, the process wasn't, nobody actually knew about it, right? And I guess that goes to just how the city commissioner's office just functions as a whole. Like if you ask 10 people what the city commissioner do, you might get 9 people to say city commission, like what is that? So I think the office needs to just be more visible, just as a whole, right? But yeah, I mean, nobody knew about it, and especially in areas in West Philadelphia, South End, they knew absolutely nothing. Now, it was a little bit, I seen a lot of more people, representatives from Center City that came down to the meetings, but man, if you talk about people from West Philadelphia, South, they still don't even know we got new voting machines. It's not good. We definitely need more outreach. And like I said, we have forums in different parts of the city, letting people know what's going on, bringing the machines out there. You could have partnered up with the Department of State, brought them out. You know, it wasn't good.
Thank you, and Khalil.
I agree with what everyone said. I mean, this process, the RFPs process, started in November. Extremely fast-track timeline that ended in February, and I think and they took longer to come up with Gritty than we got for new voting machines that are going to be around for 15 years. And the time was compressed for one reason, and I don't think it was related to the amount of time we needed to implement new voting machines. I think the reason that this process was compressed was so that the 2 of the city commissioners could run for re-election. It's just the bottom line. They compressed the process and made sure it was over by February because petitions needed to be circulated, and they wanted to be able to both oversee the process of selecting the voting machines, but then also run for office because they had to declare themselves as candidates in order to do so. And so that conflict of interest, I think, is massive. I think it's obvious, and I think it's it's why we ended up with the voting machines we had. To a man, at the different hearings, everyone said, "Hand mark paper ballots." I didn't hear a single person opt for the voting machines we chose, and we chose them anyway. And one has to stop and wonder, what was the public comment for if it wasn't to get input that would influence the decision?
Wonderful. Okay, that's it for the formatted questions. I would ask if you guys, since we do have a couple minutes left, starting with Luigi and moving this way, can you just give a 1-minute summary of your campaign? Why do you deserve the job?
And like I said in the beginning, I lived and I love Philadelphia. I've spent my whole life here. I've been a teacher for 30 years, and I think we have a incredible opportunity to use that office and reshape how Philadelphia votes. And as we go to these forums and I see all the other candidates in all the offices, I just look and think, if we don't start voting, we're never going to get what we deserve. We're never going to get what we need from Harrisburg and from Washington, D.C. And I think our teacher team can really, really do this. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you for having us. This is very important. I mean, this is not like a quote-unquote sexy thing, right? Top dollar stuff, mayor, city council, so I'm glad that y'all doing that. I really appreciate it. I think you should vote for Omar Sabir. I want to make the office more accessible, transparent, more modernized. I worked for State Senator Vincent Hughes, who's appropriations chairman for 6 years. So these ongoing changes that we need to make at the state, I had the relationships to deliver. I established a nonprofit, Vote Philly Vote. You can go there, and it's dedicated to voter participation, younger people, 18 to 35. And we have to be careful that as we try to increase the voter turnout, reduce civic engagement, that we don't forget about North Philadelphia, West Philadelphia. You know, we see a lot of people out here, there's a lot of crime going on, and people have lost a lot of faith in the system, that we just don't forget about them. So you need someone in the office that can relate to that part of the city, get them to come out, hear their concerns, educate them, and increase turnout. You can go to omarforphilly.com right now. You can get registered online.
Okay, I'm
you
sorry.
can download absentee ballots. I'm sorry.
Calm down. We gotta give everybody equal
Thank
time.
you.
Thanks.
Well, I'm excited. I'm excited because of all of you in this room. Democracy is in trouble, and I think what I present to the table is that we've got to go back to the basics, which is voter education, voter registration, and voter participation. Democracy is in living color right here, because this is how it should be. We should be coming to forums all over the city, telling people what we stand for and what we represent. I worked at that office as a chief deputy city commissioner. I know the potential. The city commissioner should, 365 days, should be the beacon should be the one that alerts everybody every 6 months that there's an election happening. I'm glad that you're giving me the opportunity to be here today, and please continue these.
Thank you.
I'm running for city commissioner because I believe every Philadelphian should have an equal opportunity to cast their vote. I believe that if we ensure that election day is running smoothly, if we make sure that every voter that's eligible to vote knows that they are and cast their vote without incident, and that if people feel more connected to the process, then we will increase voter turnout here. If we increase voter turnout locally, Philadelphians have an underutilized power that can be exercised where we can win state and national elections for Pennsylvania. I want to make it that if a candidate wants to win Pennsylvania, they have to come through Philadelphia first. And I believe under my leadership in the City Commissioner's Office, collectively we can get there. Thank you. Jen DeVore, candidate for City Commissioner, jendevore.com.
So I'd echo all the thank yous that others have brought out here. I think it's really great to have these things. I mean, you try to search for information online about the office. It's really hard. But hopefully things like this will allow people to sort of elevate the office and elevate the discussion about this position. So my candidacy is straightforward. I think relates to two really important things. First is we have a president that's going to be attacking our election systems in 2020. It's incredibly important the commissioner's office is ready, willing, and capable of stopping those threats, to stop voter intimidation, to stop voter suppression, and to make sure that voters are not being harassed or discriminated against at the polls. And so we have to have serious and competent people in that office. That's on election day. And leading up to election day, we have to have the training and process to make that work. The other days, we really need to be educating people on how to participate. That starts with middle school and high school students, and then continues to citizens that have not been utilized or have not been targeted. In the same ways, we just have to do a better job of making sure that people are aware of the process, understand how it works, and understand the mechanics of how to get the information they need to vote. Thank you.
I never considered myself to run for office ever. And then after election day after election day of problems with my vote not counting in 2016, with having the wrong ballot in 2018, I realized that I could make a difference in this office. My project management background, my communications background, I would make an election day run more smoothly in Philadelphia so that every vote that is cast is counted, and outreach throughout the year so that all Philadelphians know when election days are, that we vote twice a year, every year, and that people are excited to participate in this process. My website is moravotes.com. You can even spell it wrong and it'll get you to the right page. And I would be really happy to serve as your city commissioner and get every Philadelphian excited about civic engagement. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I just want to wrap up by saying thank you so much to all the committee people who did the research. Most especially, thank you to the candidates. I know it's an extremely busy moment in your campaigns. I wish you all the best of luck, and thank you for sharing your passion about voting with the Second Ward, which is very passionate about voting and about this race in particular.